everyone. My name is Phoebe Lee. I'm a marketing manager at NVIDIA. On behalf of NVIDIA today's speakers, I'd like to thank you for signing up and welcome to today's webinar on engineering movie magic in SOLIDWORKS. An exciting news about today's webinar, all live attendees will be entered into a drawing for a Quadro GV100 GPU powered by NVIDIA Volta architecture with 32 GB of ultra-fast HBM2 memory. Also, the attendees today will receive a coupon code to purchase selected Quadro workstation at a discounted price via email after the webinar. More details about the drawing to be followed after the presentation, so make sure that you stay through the webinar and find out more details. Just some housekeeping items while waiting for more to join. At the bottom of your screen are multiple applications widgets you can use. All the widgets are resizable and movable. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to submit them anytime through the Q&A widget. We'll try our best to answer questions throughout the presentation, but of course there can be 10 to 15 minutes Q&A section after the presentation that all the speakers will be able to answer your questions directly. Some additional information is available in the resources list. We encourage you to take a look at them, bookmark the link, or download the documents. And of course, the recording of this webinar will be available via email after today's webinar. And one thing I want to point out, so today we are going to have a lot of rich content from the speakers who would like to share with our audience. To ensure better connection speed, some high-resolution image has been compressed and optimized for the presentation. If you'd like to see the original quality of the images, we'll be sending out the presentation slide along with the recording shortly after the webinar. So feel free to take a look at the file if you'd like to access the higher res version. All right, let's welcome today's presenters. Andrew Rink, AEC Manufacturing Industry Marketing Strategy Lead from NVIDIA, will be talking about advanced technology in manufacturing industry, then followed by Brian Hüttner from Dassault Systèmes SOLIDWORKS to talk about capabilities and features of SOLIDWORKS Visualize. Then finally, Joe Hiura, an award-winning Hollywood concept illustrator who showcased his amazing work powered by SOLIDWORKS software and NVIDIA Quadro GV100 to bring some of the most memorable designs to life on a big screen. Looks like we are ready to go. Andrew, feel free to take it away.
All right. Thank you, Phoebe. A big hello, everyone. You're in for a really great session from our guest speakers today. We'll be seeing a ton of amazing renders, like Phoebe said. But before I turn it over to them, let me just take a few minutes to share some thoughts from NVIDIA's perspective. Hopefully, many of you are already somewhat familiar with NVIDIA, but you may not be fully aware that our company has transformed from being the world leader in visual computing to now becoming recognized as the artificial intelligence computing company. So over the past few years, our compute platforms have been the power behind many AI-enabled developments that have been occurring. And you might think, okay, so that's cool, but AI is not relevant to me as a product designer or maybe in the industry I work. But actually, NVIDIA's efforts in enabling AI-based applications have gone far beyond the development of self-driving cars and improving medical use cases like cancer detection. In fact, two major applications in the product design space are generative design software, which relies on NVIDIA technology, and AI-powered rendering denoising, which I'll touch on more in a moment. But first, let me share a few thoughts on the main trends that we're seeing when it comes to rendering. Firstly, the continuing expansion of model sizes, which can make it challenging to maintain that smooth design workflow that I'm sure you got used to. And if you've had that choppy graphics experience when working with a 3D model, well, you know it's frustrating, right? And it becomes even worse on 4K displays, right? So and that's something we'll be working more with as those UHDs displays get adopted. And of course, slow rendering of these complex models is a major problem when you have insufficient graphics power, right? The second trend is not only the growing use of photorealism in product design, but use of physically based rendering, or PBR for short. PBR brings a lot of benefits to visualization. Not only are the renders photoreal, but because physically based materials and lighting are used, the visualization of the model is predictable. In other words, it's simulated accurately, with light rays reflecting and refracting as they would in real life. Related to that is the use of PBR earlier in the design process. In the past, because renders are so compute intensive, it took a long time on a CPU to complete a photoreal render. That meant that rendering was often reserved for the end of the design process when the product was pretty much in the final design phase, or else it was used for creating marketing collateral. Well, now with recent advances in GPU-accelerated rendering, PBR becomes instantaneous. So designers can use that predictable visualization to iterate more quickly and look into more design options in the same amount of time. The other major trend we're all hearing about in visualization, of course, is virtual reality. Product design teams tell us they find this technology helpful because an immersive VR experience adds a powerful dimension to looking at models that you simply don't get from looking at a computer display. For instance, using a head-mounted display gives design teams a better way of testing ergonomics, like controls or sight lines from a vehicle seat, or even to identify flaws like clash detection, much earlier during design. And of course, viewing large products like planes, trains, and automobiles in life size is especially helpful. And that's particularly so for helping non-expert decision makers to understand much more intuitively what they're looking at. And of course, all that speeds up decision making, which results in ultimately in reduced design review cycles and helps keep projects stay on track. One of the ways we accelerate PBR is through AI-enabled rendering denoising. I mentioned at the beginning, AI is becoming relevant to product design, and this is a great example. And SolidWorks Visualize, many of you will be familiar, it's a leading PBR software tool, has implemented AI acceleration into their software. And the images that you see here and from SolidWorks Visualize, you see it demonstrate how quickly the AI speeds up photoreal visualization, although the details probably won't come out all that clearly on this webinar platform. But in the middle is the render without the AI turned on. And after 20 frames, you can still see the noise, especially if you look in the light, in the reflected light on the windshield. Whereas on the left, with the AI denoising on, the same render time has already produced that crisp, clean image. And to achieve a comparable result without AI acceleration takes about 290 frames with this model. So, we're getting well over 10x speed up. And that instant viewing of your renders keeps you in the creative flow because you see the results so fast and ultimately helps drive innovation. We'll hear more about SolidWorks Visualize in a second from Brian, but let's just take a very brief glance at the various options you have for harnessing GPU rendering power. You can, of course, use the Quadro GPUs in your desktop or mobile workstation, probably what most of you do currently. And some larger companies with many users, at times are providing access to an on-prem GPU render farm. More recently, service providers have begun to offer remote GPU render farms from the cloud. That's another option. And the beauty of GPU rendering is that it's always scalable to increase speed. Either in the workstation, your desktop workstation, or across the network and to those GPU clusters or cloud servers. So rendering really can absolutely be as fast as you require. We're doing a couple of polls during the webinar here this morning, and the first one here is we're curious to know what model of GPU you have in your system. So please take a second to click on the radio buttons there. You do have multiple choice here, so you can select more than one, and we'll take a look at the results in a moment. So let me give you another 4 or 5 seconds there, get your answers in, and let's move on. So that's enough about trends in rendering and how adoption of GPU-accelerated PBR is expanding. If you hadn't heard the news a couple of weeks ago, NVIDIA launched the groundbreaking new Turing generation of GPU architecture and the brand new Quadro RTX GPUs. With Turing, our engineers have achieved some amazing breakthroughs that enable unheard of performances, and you can read a few of the specs here. But for the first time ever, we have a ray tracing GPU that delivers what so many people have been waiting a decade or more for, and that's real-time cinematic quality ray tracing on UHD displays. Here's the results. So we've got a lot of Quadro users, a lot of GeForce users too. A few AMD folks on. Thank you for joining. Hopefully we can persuade you to change, and some Tesla users too. That's kind of an interesting mix there. Terrific. Thanks for responding on that. And as I was saying, along with the Turing architecture launch, we announced the three Quadro GPUs, the RTX 8000, the RTX 6000, and the RTX 5000. The top-of-the-line RTX 8000 once again extends the boundaries of GPU performance with a monster 48 gigabytes of frame buffer. That's by far the largest VRAM available on a graphics card in the industry. And each of these new Quadros introduce RT cores, which massively accelerate ray tracing. And so it means all you engineers and designers can work with these huge models that are becoming increasingly common, right? And finally can, like I was saying, render cinematic quality real time while you're working. And since AI is beginning to transform professional workflows, we made sure these new Quadro RTX GPUs are ready for that. So they incorporate tensor cores, which deliver dedicated AI processing power to professional workstations. Plus, the RTX cards also support NVLink, so two GPUs can be connected, so your effective memory footprint can be increased to a gigantic 96 gigabytes. And it's worth pointing out that there's new connector called Virtual Link, which is a new open industry standard. It's an alternate mode of USB-C that is going to that helps make VR more accessible. So at SIGGRAPH, the SIGGRAPH conference during the Quadro RTX launch, we showcased this mind-blowing demo of this Porsche concept car they designed for their 70th anniversary. And a lot of folks at first thought it was simply a video running, but it was actually a cinema quality render with reflections off the glass and the bodywork, all this incredible ray tracing just running in real time from a single workstation. So pretty astonishing, really a huge leap forward into the future. And with that, I'm going to wrap up this introduction segment and hand over to Brian Hillner from SolidWorks, who will give us an overview of their outstanding rendering software. Over to you, Brian.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Andrew, for that lovely segue. My name is Brian Hillner, and I'm the product manager for SolidWorks Visualize. I'd like to tell you a little bit about this product before we get into our customer spotlight for the meat and potatoes of this webinar. So what is SolidWorks Visualize? Well, it enables anybody who has a 3D model at any point in the design process to create professional photo quality images, animations, immersive experiences like virtual reality, and other 3D content, and as you see there, in the fastest and easiest way possible. That's Visualize's mantra, fast, easy, fun, and that's the type of product that we deliver to our customers. Speaking of our customers, you can see the wide range of industries that Visualize services: automotive, aerospace, product design, packaging, jewelry, even future vehicle concepts. And Visualize, although a SolidWorks product, it imports well over 25 different file formats. So you don't have to just have SolidWorks CAD to be able to use Visualize. You can bring in 25 different file formats. And why is photo quality visualization so important for our customers? Well, in the bold text there, it helps our customers deliver products to the market much faster, and those products are actually better products because they're able to take advantage of the photo quality visualization. And in three main ways, they're taking advantage of this photo quality. They're able to make more educated design decisions much earlier in the design process that Andrew alluded to at the beginning. And because it's so photo quality, our customers can reduce the cost and actually number of physical prototypes produced. And then here's the big kicker, is that if you don't have to produce physical prototypes and wait for them to be made in traditional photography, hire a photographer, rent a studio, you can actually create marketing content in parallel with your design development. And all this does is it allows our customers to save money and get their products to the market much faster, beating their competition. So let's look at the packaging for Visualize. We have two flavors, standard and professional, and the render quality is the exact same between the two. And just so you know, if you have SOLIDWORKS CAD Professional or Premium and you're on active subscription, you actually get a complimentary seat of Visualize Standard. And that's at a 1-to-1 ratio and can be given to anybody in your company to use. And likewise, if you have Visualize Professional, and if you're on active subscription for that product, you actually get a complimentary seat of Visualize Boost, which is our network rendering add-on. Now, like I said, the photo quality between standard and professional is the exact same. The only difference is the feature set included. So in Visualize Standard, you can take beautiful photo quality still images of your model. And in Visualize Professional here, we have more advanced features like configurations, animations, turntables, interactive images that are perfectly synced and ready to play on websites. And it's a really cool, awesome new 360 VR images and animations that you can create from Visualize Pro. And there's a lot more features in Visualize Professional, but I obviously couldn't fit them all on one slide. Here's a quick snapshot of the interface, just so you can see how easy it is. It's super intuitive. Wherever you think a button might be or the setting might be to change like the color, for example, or the camera placement, then it's actually right there. So it's pretty easy to use, even if you have no experience in 3D whatsoever. And Andrew also mentioned the power of AI denoising. And literally, this allows Visualize to be 10 times faster than without this AI denoiser. And a little shout out to one of my favorite movies, Spaceballs there, because this AI denoiser literally allows us to cruise at ludicrous speed. It is insane. A little backstory behind this AI denoiser. So we worked with NVIDIA to help train the neural network, a cluster of machines, on how to decipher noise from a rendered image. And the smart folks at NVIDIA said, hey, now that we can identify noise in a rendered image, let's just simply remove the noise. And the result is 10 times faster, and it's literally just a checkbox on and off in Visualize. And you're able to create a render that took 10 minutes now only takes a minute. An animation that took overnight can now be done during your lunch break. And here are some good side-by-side examples of the denoiser. This is a screenshot taken at 15 seconds on the same machine. The left side of the screen is the denoiser off, and the right side is the denoiser on. And literally, like, it's done. It's amazing. And if you look at the Paisley pattern on the carpet, for example, on the left side image with all the noise, it's really difficult for me to even decipher that. But the AI denoiser is so smart that it doesn't just blur out the texture trying to replace those pixels where the noise exists. It actually knows the underlying texture underneath and respects that with the denoiser turned on. So it's literally like the magic button inside Visualize. Here's another example of a custom camper van. And you can see the left side and right side with the denoiser on the right side. And then one more for this watch image here for all of our product designers out there. Now, this new denoiser feature is available in Visualize right now. It's 2018 Service Pack 3, and it's in standard and professional. And literally, it's amazing. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later on towards the close of the webinar as well. And before I hand it over to Joe, for those who want to learn more about Visualize, check out our website, solidworks.com/visualize. We have several blogs going with a ton of content, as well as hundreds of YouTube videos to become a master in no time. And for those who are on the Twitter machine, feel free to follow me. There's my Twitter handle. I'm quite active and use that to promote the product, as well as, hey, maybe you didn't know this existed in Visualize. And with that, I would like to turn things over to Joe a resident power user of Visualize, for him to show us how he uses SOLIDWORKS products powered by NVIDIA to bring his concepts to life on the big screen. Take it away, Joe.
Thanks, Brian, for the introduction, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Joe Hiura, and it's great to be here. So today, I thought I would share and talk to you a little bit about what I do in the film industry. And then I would like to switch topics and talk to you about some of my experience with Visualize, the denoiser, and the GV100 graphics card. So I've been working in the entertainment industry for about 12 years now. The thing I love about the industry is the range of different design projects that you're tasked with. In a way, it feeds that craving for variety I think most artists are looking for. And since joining the industry, for the most part, I've never looked back. So to run SOLIDWORKS, I use NVIDIA graphics cards. And really, I've relied on their products since the very beginning of my career. So when NVIDIA asked if I would be willing to participate in this webinar, I said, of course. I design in CAD, and my software of choice has been SOLIDWORKS. I started using SOLIDWORKS way back in 95, 96, and late last year I started using Visualize. So nothing in film is done in a bubble, so most of the images I'm sharing with you is a team effort. Teams are typically small, and they often consist of just a couple people. Also, most of my career has been spent as a set designer, so most of what I'm sharing today is work I did while I was set designing. Also, because the range of products are so varied, I thought I'd share a spectrum of work. And just to let you know, all these images and models were built in SOLIDWORKS. So let's get started. So this is Love's Gun from Blade Runner 2049. If you've seen the film, you'll notice the contrast between the brutal world and the brutal outside world, I should say, and the modern design of the Tyrell Corporation. Love and her gun was from the Tyrell Corporation, so we designed the gun to fit in that world. I built this model in SOLIDWORKS, and it also happens to be the first model I brought into Visualize, so this happens to be my first Visualize rendering. These are a few designs for the Green Lantern ring. Props for me is the closest thing I get to real product design. In this case, Martin Campbell, the director, wanted a ring that would be inconspicuous, and the top images represent some of those designs. We went through dozens of designs, but we soon realized that it might be too disruptive to the fans. So we went back to a more traditional comic book design, and this is what we ended up with. On the right is the Green Lantern ring, on the left is the yellow ring. These renders were done back in 2010, and they were used to sell the design to the director and the producer. If I hadn't done these renderings, it's most likely it would have been given to someone who could, and honestly, who knows what would have happened. For me, the more I can render, the more control I have over the final design. Set designers will also design large set pieces. This is a torch from Transformers 4. There's really not much to say about this piece except to show you the range of different things we're tasked with. In this case, we wanted a large set piece that we can relocate, reuse in different shots. Part of the set designer's responsibility is to create drawings for construction. Now, if you're interested in becoming a set designer, this is the foundation of what we do. I've seen set designers create hundreds of drawings for a single set. This was a satellite for Geostorm. And in this case, we built two of them. This is the overall shot, but since we don't know exactly how the director will shoot it, we will build them so you can actually walk right up to this one and you will question if you're actually looking at the real thing. Vehicles have always been my favorite. This was a transport carrier for Prometheus. It was modeled in SOLIDWORKS and was designed to fit a Tetra T813 chassis. We will often design around existing chassis. Often there isn't time or budget to build from the ground up, and creating a reliable chassis is incredibly difficult, as you can imagine. Having the vehicle go down on shoot day is a huge no-no. Most of the time we will build at least two, and sometimes we will build more, just in case of malfunction. And if stunts get involved, we might build a half dozen or more of the same vehicle. And just to note, this vehicle was massive. It was 32 feet long, 10.5 feet wide, and about 11 feet tall. I think it was like half the size of my house. This was the Batmobile for Batman vs. Superman. In this case, we had to build 2 of them from the ground up, and they were built in about 6 months. The car didn't just need to drive, but they needed to perform with stunts and be reliable. This will probably be my favorite vehicle I will ever get a chance to work on. I did this rendering, but I never really felt comfortable doing rendering since we had this amazing designer and illustrator, Ed Natividad. I worked with Ed to design the final vehicle, but having spent time with Visualize, I could have at least helped out the process by setting up renders for him. Spaceships are another favorite. This is an escape pod from Green Lantern. If you watch sci-fi films, there always seems to be an escape pod or some sort of pod. If you look to the right of this image, you can actually see a 6-foot ladder, and that's for scale. And what you see here is our practical build. In the film industry, practical build means something that we'll build physically. I worked on this with an illustrator named Paul Osmo. And eventually, we placed this in a Louisiana swamp for shooting, and this is an actual photo of the set. It's also very common for an art department not only to supply illustrations, but a computer model for visual effects. Visual effects will be here long after we've left, and when it comes to non-practical builds, a combination of illustrations and computer models will give the production designer the great amount of control over the final design. My job in Star Trek was to help build the ships. I worked with Ryan Church to produce this white model. After it was approved, it was then sent to ILM to get fully detailed. What set designers are probably best known for are interior spaces. This is a set for Avatar. It's the interior loading bay of the C-21 Dragon assault ship. The shot called for character Miles Courage to come out the door, slide down the staircase, climb around the ab suit, and open that escape hatch out the top. You can see that escape hatch in yellow in the upper right corner above the amp suit. The entire set was built for a single shot that only lasted a few seconds. Now, it seems like a lot of work for just a few seconds, but it's all about moving the story forward. And in this case, it was important to show how Courage got from point A to point B. Now I thought I'd share a couple of case studies with you. Hopefully you've all seen Galaxy of the Guardians, but if you haven't, then you probably haven't seen Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Anyway, this was the laser drill. I didn't do this illustration. It was done by George Hall. My job was to design the interior. The exterior was to look like a critter/heavy piece of machinery. I think the best vehicles in movies are given a history. And so the story behind the laser drill was as a well-used, beat-up old piece of machinery built to drill holes using lasers. We started the interior by taking storyboards, and best we can, we match them with our SOLIDWORKS model. This gives us an idea for what we need for interior space. In this case, there were about 20 of these storyboards that we had to match to. This is the final layout we came up with, and from here we're free to design the interior space. As for the exterior, we had done some early concept work of the laser drill, but now this gave us something more concrete to use for creating the final exterior. And this is a SOLIDWORKS model later in development. And this was our practical build. You can see we build the upper and lower canopies. Canopies and doorways are areas we tend to build. We match these types of exteriors and interior elements. Our visual effects have a difficult time aligning the practical build with the CG elements. This is a SOLIDWORKS model of the cockpit. And this is our practical build. As you can see, the use of color, texture, lighting really brings out the realism of the set. SOLIDWORKS is really good at putting assemblies together. In this case, we used a 3-axis router to cut plywood and then assembled those pieces together like a puzzle. This is the same wall with paint and texture. Well, on the show, I never tried to render this model, but if I had, you can see how much impact color, texture, and lighting has on the set. I think it could have saved time, money, and even could have possibly resulted in different outcomes if I had done some rendering. Either way, having the ability to render would have added a level of efficiency to the process. Finally, the entire set was placed on a motion base. This adds a tremendous amount of complexity. You know, weight, stresses, safety becomes a huge concern when you're dealing with a moving set. A lot of these issues were figured out in SOLIDWORks. Also, this motion base supporting the set here was designed in SOLIDWORks and was actually built on the stage there. So a couple years ago, I got to work on Black Panther. To me, I felt Black Panther came out of nowhere and became this huge success. And today, I believe it's still the third highest domestic grossing film in history. My job on the show was art director of vehicles. I thought I'd share a couple practical builds we did on the show. This is the Royal Town doorway staircase. It doesn't look very interesting, but if you've seen the film, the protagonist walks down the staircase several times. Since we can't build the entire ship, we'll try to build areas of the ship that the actor touches and interacts with. And I thought the staircase was a good example of that. I thought I would also show you some drawings we generated for construction. This shows the overall components of the staircase and doorway. In this drawing, the lower section of shows the patterns that we cut out, and the upper image shows how these patterns would be assembled. I used the drawing package in SOLIDWORks to do all these drawings, by the way, and using SOLIDWORks was key for getting this done quickly. We also did the same exercise when designing the staircase. Lastly, this is what you saw when the door opens up and Black Panther steps out. It's a quick moment, but I think it worked out pretty well. We also built the interior of the Royal Town Fighter. We were able to build most of the set using CNC, and then construction came in and finished the set. This is the SOLIDWORks model. And believe it or not, the craftsmanship on these sets are amazing, and this is not a rendering. This is the final practical set interior. Here's another angle of that interior. And this is what you see if you're facing the doorway. And the doorway that is what leads to that staircase that we talked about earlier. Oops, sorry, I missed that image. So that's the doorway that led to the staircase. So let's move on to what you guys have all been waiting for. Visualize. So this is one of my first visualized renderings. I think I did this image in about 5 hours opening Visualize for my very first time. For me, Visualize was intuitive, really easy to use, and I personally hate learning new software, so for me, the easier the better. And this is a more current rendering. Also, I found if I ever got stuck, there's a lot of great tutorials online. This is a solar sailor from Tron Legacy. One thing I love about SOLIDWORks is its amazing features, and being able to animate in SOLIDWORks is something I like to do. And unfortunately, as you see here, it doesn't look that great. Another thing I love about Visualize is that I can now import my SOLIDWORks animations right into Visualize. I can add lighting, color, texture, and in this case, I can add some background and foreground elements. This is a long animation, and I used the GV100 with the denoiser, which took about 5.5 hours. So I'd like to go back to Black Panther. This is the Royal Town Fighter. We like to think of this as the Black Panther Air Force One. To give you a little history on the design, we were having trouble designing it. Our first designs were taken from the comic book, and unfortunately the comic book version didn't really suit our needs, and we weren't having much success with Marvel. But the original script called for this 1960s UFO. Again, we weren't having much success using that flying disc shape everybody's so used to seeing from like 1940s. So we decided to switch it up and design this UFO. In the middle of designing it, a coworker said, "It looks like a mask." That's when we realized it looked like a lion's mask from the top and a Zulu mask from the bottom. When Marvel saw what we had done, they were so enthusiastic about the design that they said we should use this design for our current Royal Town fighter. So the UFO basically became the Royal Town fighter. The images I show you here were the exact images we presented. I believe that if we wasn't for these renderings, most likely it wouldn't have been chosen. And because the design was from the 1960s, we also went back to the drawing board to come up with a more current version. This is what we came up with. The top shows the 1960s version for comparison. Now for some rendering tests. So the great people from NVIDIA asked if I would do some tests on their GV100 graphics cards using Visualize with and without the denoiser. I then used the NVIDIA P4000 and 6000 for comparison. I first tested out the denoiser. Oops, there we go. This is a screenshot without the denoiser after 15 seconds. You can see it's pretty grainy. And this is a screenshot with the denoiser after 15 seconds. And here's a little comparison chart. As you can see, with the denoiser, the noise is gone, and it looks like a finished rendering. The denoiser was awesome. Well, in the program, I found I could make changes to my model really fast. And making subtle changes like color, texture, and lighting and camera was a lot less frustrating. In the end, I saved a lot of time figuring out what I wanted to render. It's truly a game changer. I also did some test renders. I used the model, the Royal Town fighter and Dragonfly in the background. I had depth of field and bloom just to add some complexity to the rendering. I tested all images using 1500 passes without the denoiser and 150 passes with the denoiser. I think this should give us a comparable in-quality image. All images were rendered using GPU only. I then rendered a 1080 image without the denoiser. You can see the times are pretty fast for a good quality render. But once I added the denoiser, there was simply no comparison render times. Just for your information, I did another render test using my CPU, which is a 4-core overclocked 4.2 gigahertz i7, and that did take 2.5 hours, roughly. And there's that test. I also rendered a 4K image. For us in the industry, we like to use this setting because it fits with our standard movie format, and it also prints really nicely. Again, you can see a vast improvement while using the denoiser. So I wanted to show you an animation. So we did a test animation. I did this 360 using the Royal Town fighter with using bloom only. And that was a 14-second animation. As you can see, an animation that took this long can be a problem. So if you look at the times, for me, it's way too long. If I want to do an overnight rendering, it actually has to be under 12 hours. I can't come into the work tomorrow, the next day, and get back, and the rendering's not done. Ideally, I like to run SolidWorks when I'm. One thing that bothers me is my models in SolidWorks are so large and so intense that I don't like running renderings while I'm actually working in SolidWorks. So blocking out time to do rendering animations is a big deal to me. But when I use the denoiser, it's no longer a problem. Using the GV100 card, I can actually do renderings during a long meeting or long lunch. With any of these cards, I can actually set up numerous animations using the queue. Either way, all the denoiser animations fall way under my requirements for rendering overnight. So my key takeaways and my impression, speed. For me, this is a no-brainer. The faster, the better. Workflow was greatly improved using the denoiser, and rendering was extremely fast with the GV100. Time equals money, and the best rendering option for me was the denoiser plus the GV100 card. Brian, who spoke earlier, thought I could call myself a visualize expert, but truthfully, it wouldn't take long to become an expert. It's really easy to learn, and you can take your image to a very high level. I think the true challenge is learning to be a good renderer. I look at it this way. You might be good at using a table saw, but it doesn't mean you know how to build a desk. And I believe the pursuit of rendering is an ever-increasing skill set. And computing power. For me, a good computer, I should say a great computer is important to have. I jump from job to job, and I also have to supply my own computer. For me, my computer is an extension of me, and the last thing I want is for that computer to become the thing that holds me back. So not only does time equal money, but I think it also is job security. So in conclusion, I have another animation to show you. Okay, wait. So in conclusion, I learned a lot from doing these tests, especially with animations. I'm currently working on avatar sequels as a concept illustrator, and using Visualize has been great, and I use it in my everyday workflow. And having access to the denoiser and the GV100 was absolutely fantastic. And I had one more animation to share with you. It looks like it might be a little grainy, but you can really do a lot with the animation side. I really enjoyed that part. Anyway, that's my review, and thanks again for listening. I guess to pass it back to you, Phoebe. Hello?
Great. Oh.
Hello.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I was waiting for
a second there. I thought I might have gotten disconnected.
Yeah, I was watching the video and waiting for it to finish playing. So, thanks, great. So, Joe, Andrew, Brian, thanks so much for a great presentation and providing so much great content. So now we are officially entering the Q&A section, but I've seen a lot of questions coming in. So if you'd like to send questions specific to the speakers, please mention the speaker name, including in your questions. I can address them accordingly. But I do want to bring out some news that's coming up soon from NVIDIA I would like to share with you. So what you can see right now is our GTC event in 2019. So GTC is our annual event that we host, invite a lot of industry experts, and we do have a great lineup of sections for AEC and manufacturing next year. So if you haven't been to the event, feel free to explore more information on our website, which is www.nvidia.com/GTC. You'll be able to find out more information. And we're so glad to have you to the event next year, and you'll be able to even network with 7,000 attendees in the industry and learn more about our GTC and GPU technology. Another thing I would like to mention is the giveaway that we talked about earlier. So we will announce the winner on our Twitter handle. Also bring up the slide real quick. So our Twitter handle is #NVIDIADesign. So it'd be great if you can follow us just to find out if you're the lucky winner. And we are looking into announce the winner by the end of next week. But if you just want to, be friend with us, learn about the new technology, product announcements, this is a really good place to socialize with us. All right, let's go back to Q&A. I see a lot of questions for Joe, so I'm going to start with the first one I see here. Joe, this is for you. This question from Sadik. What is the SolidWorks and Autodesk animation software integration as mentioned that the SpaceTrack, Ship, and ILM software is mainly they use Maya? Joe, can you understand the question? Sorry, because am I not?
I think I get the gist of the question.
Okay.
This model, we did this in the art department, and basically I worked with I was handed an illustration from Ryan Church, and I kind of started it was a side view, and we started building that, the enterprise in SOLIDWORKS. And then worked back and forth to create this model. This model will end up going to ILM with whatever ILM wants to do with it. If it's to put it in Maya, that's what they will do, and they will rebuild this model. But this becomes the foundation, the proportions, the scale, all of it comes from this model. And so my part is really just to hand them kind of an overall proportional study that is what was approved by J.J. Abrams when he was reviewing it. Does that answer the question? I'm hoping that does.
Thanks, Joe. I think the next question is probably for Andrew. It's more technical. So when will a single slot heat-sink version of Tesla Core Quadro be released, and will not be occupied more than one slot?
Well, I mean, we do have single slot Quadro GPUs today. So I think from the P4000 down, those are all single slot professional GPUs. The Quadro P4000, Quadro P2000, Quadro P1000. That answers the question.
Okay, sounds good. Yep. And I think next question is for both Andrew and Brian. The question is, how long did it take for you at NVIDIA to train the AI to make it reliable enough for your production? Is it possible for a small company to train such network on its own? So Andrew, would you like to start
Sure.
answering?
Yeah, two questions there. The first one's a tricky one, and I honestly don't know the accurate answer to how long it took us to train the AI. The second part of the question, I think, is probably easy to answer because, yeah, sure, any company, really doesn't matter the size now, with all of these new RTX Quadro GPUs, because you have got the tensor cores integrated into the hardware now, they're ideal for all of those AI workflows. So you can run your own sort of deep learning algorithms to do that work yourself. A lot of software developers are doing that exactly now, for example.
Thanks, Andrew. Brian, do you have any notes after that?
That was a pretty good description and answer. We're just really impressed with this training set with the denoiser, and it's still, I would say maybe he's only been around for maybe a few months publicly, and then at least a year before that being trained. So this, in the age of computers, and this training set is still very young. So the more images and test files we send to it, the smarter it becomes, and then the faster it is, and the better it handles, like maybe brushed aluminum. When we first got the first few builds of the denoiser, that was still coming in a bit splotchy, but we just fed it more images and more test files, and it just learned what the brushed aluminum was, and then handled it perfectly. So it's this really cool living, breathing organism that we're teaching, kind of like a little kid.
Oh, great. And the next question, I think, is for maybe both Brian and Joe. The question is how easy it is to import SOLIDWORKS animation into Visualize.
Well,
Joe, do you want to take that one, Joe?
Yeah, I'll just. I tell them my experience with the solar sailing. It was actually very easy. It shows up right in your timeline. That the timeline that's established in SOLIDWORKS is also what you see in Visualize. So from there, you can start adding parts and other pieces right into that model and start animating those too. So they don't. You can actually bring in multiple animations probably into one. I just haven't tried that, but I found it was very easy. Ryan, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, that's actually a really good recap, Joe. And basically any animation that you have in SOLIDWORKS CAD, like a motion study or even an exploded view, you can select which motion study you want to export. And then as long as you have Visualize Pro, because that's where the animation features are kept in the Visualize suite, as long as you have Visualize Pro, then as Joe said, it literally just plays through your animation in SOLIDWORKS CAD upon export. opens it up in Visualize, and all the materials come across, your lighting, your backgrounds if you want, that all comes across, and literally you can just hit the render button and you're off to the races.
One more thing to add, I did see a tutorial online where they had stacked a bunch of blocks together and they removed a block. And using SolidWorks, you can have like an artificial gravity and have that thing sprawl out on the ground. And basically they did that, and you can do that also in Visualize by doing that, pulling that animation into Visualize as well.
Thanks, Joe. Next question is actually for Joe. It's also a comment from the audience. I didn't know the SolidWorks was used in the movie industry. Is it a tool that you use, or is it a standard tool? I guess the question is it a tool that you specially choose to use, or is it more the standard application in this market?
Well, I've always used it. So ever since I've been in the industry, that's been my primary software. Everybody comes, all different set designers will use different applications. So it's not universal. But in the last, I'd say, 3 years, we've had multiple people change from their old software into SolidWorks, which is really really tells you a lot about how powerful SolidWorks is, because their old software is their native software. They could have been learning that for 6 or 7 years. To switch softwares into something like SolidWorks is a huge leap for them, and they are realizing that with the people around them who are using SolidWorks, that they have to make that change in order to be, relevant in the industry now. So it's become a much more popular format.
Great, thanks, Joe. And also, next question is for you. Are you using the GV100 as your primary video card, or do you have a separate card for your display?
I use the GV100 for all my displays. I'm running 3 displays right now. But before I ran the P4000, so it was quite a huge jump once I switched over. But now I've just been running the GV100.
Great. And I see a couple questions, I think, both for Brian and Joe. What was your favorite movie that you worked on? So, Joe, would you like to start?
Oh, that's a hard one, because I think not always is the funnest film to work on is the one that has the most success. I actually loved working on Tron and Oblivion because I love the director. He has a mind for great design, and he was always part of that process. Darren Guilford, the production designer, is an amazing guy. He also did Star Wars, by the way, first new of the episodes. And he's a great production designer. And, when you have the right team together, you just want to follow that team wherever you go. I actually had a great experience with Black Panther as well. So, it just depends on the group of people. I'd rather work with a great group of people than a film that might become this huge blockbuster. Is that?
Thanks, Joe. Brian,
okay.
Would you like to add some color?
Oh, I saw that question. Although I am flattered, I haven't worked on any movies in the movie industry, but I'll agree with what Joe said.
It's fine. So next question, I think for Andrew. I would assume the card that the question is referring to, it means the GV100. So can the GV100 handle simulation, or is mainly designed for rendering visualization?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, it is very well suited for engineering simulation. Yep, ideally suited for that. We'll do a great job with big models, for sure.
Thanks, Andrew. Let's see, next question. So the next question is for Brian. How much time would it take to render 8K footage?
Sure, good question. So obviously that kind of depends on a few, one of which is the scene complexity. Like if you have a bunch of bloom, like Joe said, and layered transparent objects, and really expensive to calculate items in your scene. And then obviously the second one is the powerful NVIDIA graphics card that you have. So as we all know, time is money, and the more you buy within your graphics card, the more you invest in it, the more time and therefore money you actually save. So those render time comparisons with the images that Joe showed at the end of his presentation kind of give a good example of an image versus an animation, also versus a 4K image. An animation is just, 30 still frames stitched together. So you can kind of extrapolate how long it'll take one frame to complete on your hardware setup and multiply that by the number of frames. So although we can't really say an 8K video at, 4 seconds or 5 seconds will take this long to render, it really just depends on your machine setup. But those times with the denoiser are insanely accelerated, as you saw there. So it's really important to get a graphics card from NVIDIA that supports those denoisers at the top of your budget, because honestly, you will literally save hours, days, weeks, months, and even years out of your life.
Thanks, Brian. And next question is also to you regarding the software. How do you turn on the denoiser?
Excellent question. So in Visualize 2018 Service Pack 3, which is when we launched the denoiser for the first time, you can go into Tools, Options, and there's a checkbox to enable the denoiser there. And there's also a toggle to tell Visualize to include it in your main toolbar right at the top of the screen in Visualize. That makes it easy to toggle on and off. And in Visualize 2019 and later, we made that toolbar, that button in the main toolbar to toggle the denoiser, we made that permanent up there. So now it's not really hidden in the Tools options. So as soon as you launch Visualize, it'll be right there at the main toolbar to toggle it on and off. You do have to have a specific level of NVIDIA graphics card. The older generations of the Fermi generation don't support the denoiser. And so if you have a card that's newer than Fermi, then you're A-OK. And as long as your graphics card has 4 gigabytes of RAM, of VRAM. So the P4000, for example, I believe that has like 8 gigabytes. So that one's totally fine. And the denoiser's really well suited and optimized to run on the newer NVIDIA cards, like the Pascal and Volta series for sure. And while I have the mic, I did want to mention one more thing with to answer a Visualize question. Is one of the questions that came through was, why didn't me, Brian, talk more about the ability to create 360 virtual reality animations from Visualize? That is possible with Visualize Pro, and starting in 2018 and newer. And we're really one of the only visualization companies to allow you to create, a 360 camera to create still images that you can pan and look around. But if you animate that 360 camera, boom, now next thing you know, you've got a 360 VR animation that you can upload to YouTube, play on your smartphone, pop your smartphone in $15 Google Cardboard, and next thing you know, you're looking around this awesome camera flight of one of Joe's awesome, new vehicles or ships that he designed for his movies.
That is so cool. That is so cool.
That's great.
All right, next question is to Joe, but Brian, feel free to add some colors after. The question is, Joe, have you seen or heard of any SolidWorks used in game industry as well? Or have you only used for film industry, or are you aware if this being used for game industry in Hollywood?
I don't work on games, but I do work with a lot of guys that come from games, and they're, actually well designed. They've been designing games for years and years. And over the last few years working with these guys, I found that they've actually really appreciated what SolidWorks is capable of doing. They tend to work in meshes, so that's going to be a different type of software. And what SolidWorks is really good at doing is really creating something that's real. That's one the comment they've always said is, whenever I build something, that looks real. I actually really feel like when I this is rendered, that I can touch it. And often with a mesh model, that isn't always easy to do because of the way meshes work. SolidWorks is really good at building a watertight model where surfaces and surfaces could be, the tolerances could be built right in, very similar to regular product design. And so what you end up with is a really nice, solid model. So although it's not used in the game industry, at least I don't know of it being used, if it's used as a foundation for, a model that might be used in the gaming industry, it could be. Brian, do you have anything to add?
That was a good summary. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. And as we're approaching the end of the webcast, so this will be the last question will be answered. So the question, I think it's probably most for Brian or Andrew. The question is how to compare image with denoiser and with the higher rendering samples. The final quality will be similar. Andrew, would you like to elaborate on this first?
Yeah, I think if I've got the question, so it's really the speed of the render rather than the quality of the final. Because eventually, if you let the render run without the AI acceleration, it's going to achieve the same quality, but it's just going to take 10 times longer. So the AI, it really does accelerate that denoising of the pixels, so you get a nice crisp image much more quickly. And you just don't have to wait so long to get that final view.
Thanks, Andrew. Brian, would you like to add some notes to this?
Sure. So basically, Andrew pretty much said it all. But with the denoiser, like we did a lot of side-by-side tests and comparisons to understand, is it 2 times faster, or 20 times faster, or 4 times faster, and we, through those image comparison testings of with it on and with it off and lowering the sample count, we actually arrived at a very even, about 10 times faster. And that's what we used for all of our benchmarking publicly to customers, and also, as you saw here, with Joe and the side-by-side comparisons with the Black Panther Royal Talon spaceship.
So what I might add too is, with RTX, in the future, we're going to have this capability, like I was talking about, that we've already seen as we showcased at SIGGRAPH. But because I know the question was more about final frame, the renders, but what I'm talking about is the real-time ray tracing. So you're actually seeing your image pretty much instantly with these new RTX Quadros with big models, in a single workstation. So that of course, the models that Joe was showing and animations and things like that, it's more complex and time consuming, but you can with smaller models do them in real time.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Brian. All right. Before we close this out, I would like to say big thank you to our speaker, Andrew, Brian, Joe, for a great webinar, great presentation and content, and also to our attendees for spending an hour with us. There will be a short survey questionnaire after the webinar ends on your browser, so it would be great. Fill it out and let us know what you think about the webinar. Your feedback would be greatly appreciated. And as already mentioned, recording and the slide for download will be available to you via email shortly after. So this concludes today's webinar, and we hope you enjoyed this webinar and looking forward to seeing you at our next one. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys.